What's happening, guys? Back with another reverse diet update. This is actually going to be a 2-week update, and that is because I didn't do one last week because I had been gone for the Yorton Cup and I was in Washington DC for 5 days, was not tracking, didn't have any weights, so there wasn't a whole lot for me to update you with. So what I ended up doing was we got back, waited a few days, checked in with Paul after my weight had kind of stabilized a little bit, because it's always going to be a little bit different when we come back from a trip. And checked in with him, and then waited another 5 days to check in once again to get back on my normal Tuesday morning check-in routine with him. So before I left on the trip, I was 171.1 pounds. Went away, came back, the very next day I was 171.4. So pretty much about the same, which is actually pretty incredible. Usually I'm up a little bit from a trip and then it kind of comes back down to normal the next couple of days and things kind of stabilize. But I think one of the things that's important to talk about here is the fact that I was gone for 5 days and I wasn't tracking my food and I wasn't being super diligent and I didn't blow up and get fat, right? Like we always have this tendency to be like, if I'm not on my plan, things just kind of go crazy. And I think a big part of that is, for one, a lot of people don't have the best relationship with food. I certainly used to be there myself. So whenever you're off plan, you feel like, well, I just need to get all this food and just binge my face off because I'm not going to be able to eat it again. Well, I don't have that mindset anymore. So I know how to kind of stay on track without being super diligent about things, and at the same time, we were really active, and typically most people are active when they go on trips and vacations. It's like you just become a lot more active than you would be in a regular setting, your everyday life. We walked around, we looked at all the different monuments and lots of different museums, and just we're constantly moving all the time up on our feet at the show and moving around. So you burn a lot more calories, so you can kind of get away with eating a little bit more food because you're just going to burn a lot of it off. So I think on a side note, that's an important thing to keep in mind is with the reverse, while being as diligent as you can be is going to make the process go as well as possible, that doesn't mean if you are off plan that there's absolutely no point. You always have to kind of keep that in mind. So anyway, yeah, I came back and I was at 171.4, which is almost the same as what I left prior to that. Waited a couple days to see where things would stabilize. It actually came down a little bit. So for the weekly average, I just kind of took the day before and then a few days after, the average came out to be 170.875. So that was actually only about 0.4 pounds up from the previous week. So Paul went ahead and gave me the usual another 10 grams of carbs, which brought me up to 390 grams of carbs, and then said, okay, let's check back in 5 more days and see where things are. So as you'll see here, after those 5 days were up, weight continued to stay really stable, and basically it was at 170.725, so actually down a touch from the weekly average, but basically staying pretty much the same. So weight is really stable right now. So once again, 10 more grams of carbs. And what does that mean? 400 grams of carbs, baby! I've literally never been in the 400 Carb Club, so that's pretty sweet. And the way things are going, it's looking like it could get quite a bit higher, which is pretty exciting. It's pretty fun. So it's a lot of carbs, especially for someone who can't do gluten. You can only eat so much rice and potatoes and oats before it's like blah. So I've started including a lot more some of the gluten-free breakfast cereals and the rice-based cereals and things like that. Eating a lot of fruit and trying to get my carbs in. So it's becoming a little bit of a job, but it's not so much that I'm absolutely dreading it at this point, so it's still pretty good. So as a whole, for the entire 11 weeks, that puts me up about 800 calories from my cutting macros and only up about 4 pounds. So the process is going extremely well. And if you look at the carbs from my cutting macros, it was 227. It's entirely possible within a handful of weeks here that I could literally end up doubling the amount of carbs that I was eating at that point, which is just wild to think of. But it just kind of goes back to what I was talking about way in the beginning of this series when I first started talking about things. When you get really lean, the body responds really well to a reverse diet. It just always seems to do that. And as we talked about a couple weeks ago, it seems like it does really well with carbs over fat in the earlier stages of a reverse, especially when someone's lean. The other thing that's pretty wild is I'm pretty much eating the exact same amount of total calories that I was at the end of my building phase back when I was 190 pounds, and I'm now 170, eating the same amount of calories. So if you don't think the metabolism is adaptable, think again. Reverse dieting can absolutely work. And especially if you put yourself in a good position, you can really reap the rewards of it, especially when you're a little bit more diligent, which I am being more diligent this time than I was last time. Right? Last time, I basically just took my total calories and my total protein and made sure I was hitting that, but I was just looking at the calories in my Fitness Pal, whereas now I'm making sure that my macros equate. So even if my macros are off a little bit, I'm making sure the total calories equate from the actual macros and not going off that calorie number, because that number can be off a lot, especially if you eat a lot of foods that have, say, a lot of sugar alcohols or higher fiber type foods, because that's kind of a nutrition loophole that companies can get away with and make it look like it's less calories than it really is. So say for instance you ate like an entire pint of Halo Top, it might say on the thing 320 calories per pint, but if you add up the macros it's probably more like 420, so it's about 100 calorie difference just there. So especially if you eat a lot of quote unquote diet foods, that can make a big difference. So I'm trying to be really diligent about things, and that's obviously helping. But yeah, really happy with the process so far. Everything's going really well. Looks like I'm going to become a macro monster here and get in a good spot, and that gives me, you know, a really good opportunity to do some really good building over the next 6, 7, 8 months until I go into show prep towards the end of next year. So that's all I got for this one. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to you later.
I'm addicted to the love that you're giving. Every minute, every day I've been craving.